how we understand relationships and the best way to be in a relationship. And we're going to continue with this. Well, the last thing that we were really discussing was the idea of when you see a flaw, we said in your husband, but you could apply this to any relationship. It doesn't have to do with a husband. It applies to all relationships. That when we see a flaw, can we recognize this as our flaw? And then, of course, if we recognize it as our flaw, it's easier for us to be more tolerant of this flaw. So remember, Christelle came up with one vis-a-vis her husband, and Danielle came up with one with her child. And it was sort of an empowering moment to recognize that we share the same flaws. So since it's been a week, Christelle or Danielle, would you like to comment? Did anything shift in that direction after that awareness?
Unfortunately not. This is a good reminder. It's a good reminder of that. A very good reminder and very timely.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Good, you're on tonight. Great.
Yeah.
Christelle, what about you? Same. All right. We start with good reminders, and from good reminders, we hopefully do some work. You know, we have to start by remembering. It's sometimes hard to remember. It truly sometimes is hard to remember. And then once we're remembering, we can do the work that's needed. I don't know why my screen looks so unbelievably blurry. Oh, okay, now it cleared up. All right. The idea is a fewfold. One idea, and this idea is when you understand that the other person, if it's your child, probably it came from you, maybe not. But if it's anyone else in your life, my gosh, we possess the same flaw. So what's annoying me and the other person, I really have to take ownership for, meaning I also have this issue. And if I have this issue, the original thought is so I can be much more tolerant of it in the other person because I have this issue as well. An additional point, hi Julie, an additional point, which we did not discuss last week, is if you recognize this and work through this in yourself, this again will help on two levels. It will inspire or give a great model example for the other person. If it's appropriate, you can share, like if it's your child, I think that's a great thing to share. Oh, you know, sometimes you get very stuck in your opinion, you know, mommy sometimes also gets stuck in her opinion, and I'm really working on it. And, you know, today I had an idea and other people thought differently. And I said, you know what, I'm putting my idea on the side because I don't want to get stuck in my opinion. And you keep sort of modeling, obviously, especially in like a child situation where it's the most easy because that's sort of your role, to model your work. If it's with another person, like an adult, you're not going to talk exactly like that, but hopefully they'll see like, wow, she used to be so, and she's not. That means one can change. That sort of gives me permission, hope, room to think of changing. And also, you're not going to get as upset about it if you no longer possess the issue. Because the reason why it bothers us so much is because it's our issue. When it's not our issue, we're not going to emote it in the other person. We can identify it, we can notice it, but it's not going to emotionally bother us the same way. So those are two great advantages beyond the one we said last week. So we now have three great advantages for doing this work. So I'm going to say it one more time for give other people a chance to think about this in terms of themselves and people they are in relationships with. So the question, of course, was, is there a flaw that someone you're in a relationship has that bothers you? And that actually, if you think it over, you realize, oh, that's my flaw. I also have that flaw. Maybe not to the same degree, but I also have that flaw. And if you can identify that, if you can identify that the flaw that bothers you in someone else is actually your own flaw, which is most of the time the case, that something that really bothers you in someone else is usually your flaw. We said there was 3 advantages pulling together. We said last week and this week. 1, you're more tolerant of the other person when you recognize you're flawed in the same way. It wouldn't be fair of you not to be more tolerant because you're flawed in the same way. And 2, as you now recognize your flaw, take responsibility and work through it, this is at the least modeling for the other person that one can work through this. And 3, when you no longer have this flaw, it won't bother you to the same degree in the other person. It will be a fact, but it won't be an emotional trigger. So anyone else can think of flaws they have that they're really, well, maybe it's easier to think of the other way. Things that really annoy you in people you're close to. And if you think about it, you actually recognize you have those same flaws. So Danielle and Christelle both came up last week rather quickly with such ideas. Anyone else? I'm not guaranteeing that you always have to have your flaws reflected in the people in your life. Most of the time, though, the flaws that really bother us, that really annoy us, that really grate on us, we really do have them one way or another. And that's why they're so annoying to us. Aliza, this is a different class. Our class is going to start in 45 minutes.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome to join. You're totally welcome to join the class.
Thank you. I'm going to come back in then in 45 minutes. Thank you so much.
No problem. I just
sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
No problem, Aliza. Yeah. So far we had Danielle and Christelle. If everyone could really think about this, can they identify something that bothers them, a flaw that bothers them in someone else they have a relationship with, a close relationship? It could be a spouse. It doesn't have to be a spouse. Like Danielle saw a child, could be a relative, it could be just someone close in your world. Something that bothers you and the other person. If you think about it, can you recognize that you also have this flaw, perhaps in a very different degree, but on some level you also possess this flaw? Can anyone else think of a situation like that in their life?
I would say lack of patience.
Okay. So you share that with someone else in your world.
Yes. I would say my husband and I don't have very much patience.
Do you find that you get annoyed with him when he's impatient?
Yep.
Okay. In other words, the thought here is that the thought of our sages is that what really bothers us in someone else is our own flaws. Because really they're mirroring and evoking what we need to work on. And that's why they really bother us, because we really do need to work on them. And if we didn't possess the same flaw, it wouldn't bother us as much. Okay. I mean, we understand no one's perfect. So, okay, he's flawed. You know, people are flawed. But when it's my flaw, that's when it really grates on me, because it's really almost like an inner trigger for me to say, I got to step up to the plate and do my own work. And that's why it bothers me so much. Julie, the question was, if you can identify a flaw in someone else that you have a close relationship with, that now that that really bothers you, and that if you think about it, you recognize you actually have the same flaw. That was the question, because many people have that situation. I'm not saying everyone has that situation, but many people do. And it's really important to recognize this, that the reason we're so bothered is because, again, it's very subconscious, but the reason we're so bothered is because we actually have that flaw as well. And we really need to work through it. And as I was saying, when you work through it, you're going to have much more tolerance for the other person. You're going to be a great model that one can work and change. And when you remove it from yourself, it won't bother you as much in the other person because you don't have it. So it's not triggering anything. So for those of you that recognized it, so we got like 60% here that already say yes, they can think of something very specific, a flaw in someone they're close to that really bothers them, that they actually recognize they also possess. And again, you do not have to possess it to the same degree of intensity or frequency. It's just, do you have it? Often you don't have it to the same degree of intensity and frequency, and that's why you didn't realize you had it. But now you're thinking about it and you realize you do have it. So it would be really nice to create a game plan for change. It would really be nice, and it'd really be a gift to the relationship. Because when you do this work for yourself, it's really helping the other person as well. Both it's helping them change and it's helping you not be upset with them, even if they don't change. So I would say for those that didn't come up with a flaw, I'll give you this as your homework. To try to think of someone that you have a relationship with that has a flaw that really bothers you. Of course, you have people that have relationships with, and of course they have flaws because we all have flaws, but a flaw that really annoys you, really bothers you. And then look to see if you can find it in yourself. For people that already did that work, like Danielle and Christelle and Corey, continuing the work is, how am I going to change it myself? How am I going to change it myself? And again, sometimes it's really hard to recognize this, that you share a flaw, you share this flaw, because like, I'm not like that at all. But then if you really look at yourself, you can see, oh yeah, I am. I mean, it's expressed itself in a different way. It's in a much more minor way, but I really do have that weakness. And that's why it bothers me so much in the other person. It bothers you so much because you have it. This is actually God's strategy for us to grow, to recognize our flaws, because love covers over all flaws, self-love. So because we love ourselves, it's very hard for us to honestly recognize our flaws. But in the other person, we don't have such a problem. We can see their flaws. So if we see the flaw, and if we know the flaw really annoys us, really grates on us, really irritates us, we can ask ourselves, why is it bothering so much? I mean, I'm not perfect. Why am I expecting perfection from someone else? Why does it bother me so much? And possibly the answer could be, oh, because I have this flaw as well. And since I have it as well, it triggers me. It really, 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 really bothers me. And again, so you're going to work on it yourself. Why is he going to stop? Because you're working on yourself. So on a very simple psychological level, it's giving room. Like, oh, I could change. Hey, she's changing. She always used to be like this. She's changing. I could change as well. There's also a spiritual component. And this applies in all situations, including situations where you don't have the same flaw. But if you love someone and care about them, and they're struggling with something, you can add, increase, do work in that area, and tell God that the work you're doing should be a gift for so-and-so. This concept is not limited to a spouse, is not limited to a child. You could do this for anyone. You do this for a friend you care about. You can do this for a parent. You can do this for a colleague, a neighbor, for anyone in your world. If you see someone is struggling, you can work on yourself in that area and ask God that the energy you're creating from this work should be gifted to this person to help them in their struggles. So now when you're doing this work that you really have to do because you have this issue, but when you're doing this work and your spouse or someone else you're close to needs this work done as well, you can ask God that the work you're doing should also be helping that other person. And therefore the energy of it will draw down and will really help the other person change, so the change will be easier than imagined because of all the help generated by your work. Your work's really going to be helping them do their work. And as we said, even if the other person doesn't change, it should not bother you as much. Because again, the bothering is part of God's whole plot to get you to recognize your own work and change. Once you change, you're more dispassionate. Okay, he has it. I had it too. I changed. God willing, he or whoever else it is will change as well. Now, if you are emotionally responding, but you don't have this issue, sometimes you have to like sort of analyze what's the real issue here. Like, well, it really annoys me that my husband always takes off his dirty socks and just dumps them on the floor and by the couch, by the bed. Like, I mean, he can't pick them up. I could pick them up. I mean, I had to pick them up. So you're like, I never dump dirty socks on the floor. So obviously I don't have this issue. Okay, you don't have that manifestation of the issue. But if you think about it, what's the issue? What's he doing and why is it bothering me? What's he doing that's bothering me is the self-centeredness. Like, is there a living maid, a cleaning lady? Yeah, me, you know. So the self-centeredness of it is what's bothering you. That egocentricity of it is what's bothering you. Oh, maybe I don't dump dirty socks, but maybe I also am a little bit egocentric. Maybe I also sometimes put myself before my children, my parents, my spouse, other people in my world. So when you understand where the flaw is coming from, it's easier to identify it in yourself. Now, again, I'm not saying that every flaw in someone else you always have, but the concept is the ones that really bother you, you have, and that's why they really bother you. So when you do this and you recognize that your emotion is coming because of your own lacks, and you work on yourself, two things happen. One, you stop emoting his issue, which is really great advantage right there. And as we said, your work is helping him do his work. On the physical plane, we said you're giving a model. On the spiritual plane, your spiritual energy that you're generating is going to help him do his work as well. And again, as we said, this is not limited to your spouse, this is not limited to your child. You could give anyone in your world this gift of energy to help them in their path. If you see someone struggling with a relationship with God, you can strengthen your relationship with God and say, God, this isn't for me. All the energy created by this should go to help so-and-so. I see this person is struggling with morality. I'm enhancing my morality. God, all the energy drawn down by this should go to help so-and-so. You can do this for anyone in the world. So that's one whole perspective on how we deal with flaws in people that are important to us. There's another way we deal with flaws. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, especially in terms of marriage, that sometimes what looks to you like a flaw, maybe it's not a flaw. And sometimes actually, maybe it's something positive. Maybe it's an advantage. You just didn't perceive it that way. Like maybe you're going out with someone and you're like, oh, I'm so much more spiritual. He's so much more like grounded. And after all, you realize, oh, it's good he's grounded because I'm so spiritual. I need someone grounded. Or if you're going out with someone and get distracted from talking to you because there's little children around and he starts playing with them or interacting with them or being so nice to them. And you're like, why is he doing that? Like, hello. But then later you think it over, you're like, actually, that's a beautiful quality. I'd be so happy that my husband should care about children that way. That's great. That's not a disadvantage. That's an advantage. So sometimes we have to shift in our perspective, and we can see that things that we looked at as flaws and annoyed us, and we view it as, I don't know if I want to be with this person, or I don't like this about this person. If we reframe it, it's actually a very positive thing. It's actually a strength. It's actually an asset. in terms of yourself, sometimes it's easier to see this in yourself. Was there a time, do you have an example within yourself of something you used to think of as a flaw and over time you realized isn't a flaw? Anyone can think of an example within themselves of something they used to think of as like a weakness on their part, and then actually they realize it's strength? If you can't think of it within yourself, can you think of it with a friend, with a relative, with someone in your life? Maybe someone had this experience with their husband or with a child. Something they thought of as like a weakness in the child, or a weakness in their husband, a weakness in the friend, a weakness in the relative. And actually something happened, a situation happened, and they reframed it and realized, no, actually in certain situations, this is a great strength.
Well, this may be something. I used to think it was a bad quality to not be so talkative.
Mm-hmm.
Then I realized, well, it's actually it was helpful for me to listen more to other people if I wasn't talking. So I feel like I gained a lot by being more of a better listener, I guess. I didn't feel as bad about not talking as much.
That's so nice. That's a perfect example. I really like that. Corey said she was quiet and she thought, oh, that's not so great to be so quiet. And then she realized that because she's quiet, she's a better listener. I like that. Right. I remember you saying that, Julie, but I'm talking about something a little different. The example I know you shared with us, and it was a very beautiful example, is that if your child was timid, you called them brave and pulled that out of them. So I'm saying something a little different. I'm saying, though that did work beautifully with you, and I definitely remember that story. That was very powerful. But what I'm saying is, like Corey said, like I think that was a great example, that, oh, this child is so quiet, and you think, oh yeah, they're so quiet. That's a flaw, so to speak, or a weakness. And then you actually realize, well, no, they're quiet and they are far deeper and a deeper thinker because they're quiet and not just jabbering away. Or like Corey's saying, because she's quiet, she can listen more because she has less of a need to talk. So she's not so got to interject and say my words. I'm actually more taking in the other person's words. So that's the question. So Corey gave a beautiful example with herself. If someone has an example with themselves or with their spouse or with other important people in their life, it doesn't have to be such an important person in your life. It's more the skill of like refashioning how you envision these things to see the strength instead of the weakness. Anyone else have that experience? Oh, that's a great one. So Julie said, piggybacking off Corey, that her oldest child, she's thought, oh, he is weak, is quiet, is more introverted. And then she's like, oh, he's a listener, he's a processor. Those are good, beautiful things. So what I'm labeling as a flaw, too quiet, I can now refashion as a great listener, a great processor. It's a beautiful skill to develop that. Because so often things, even if they aren't always the best traits, but very often in certain situations, they are good. And it's when we look at them positively, that helps also the other person envision themselves positively instead of like, not as good as, not good enough because. So anyone else have situations where they've done that? Or it just was so obvious that they didn't have to do a lot of work. It was just obvious that actually this is a really good quality. Okay, well, another idea, this is all ideas about processing flaws. So the first concept we were discussing was recognizing you have the same flaw with the ideas from there. The second concept was, is this really a flaw? You know, think it over, and maybe in certain situations, it's actually an advantage. Third idea, this is more specifically for a spouse. This isn't like for a child or for a colleague, but for a spouse, sometimes what you perceive as a flaw is an advantage because it balances out you, which is beneficial in the relationship or beneficial for the children. If you're very high pressured and your husband's more relaxed and you're like, oh, why is he so relaxed? I mean, there's so much pressure. And then you're like, hey, maybe it's good that he's relaxed because I'm definitely not. You know, if your husband's overly generous and indulgent with the kids and you're like, oh no, he's so overly, you know, and then you're like, wait, maybe it's really good because maybe I'm a little too strict. I'm a little too like pulling back. So maybe it's a balance that, you know, there's that, you know, indulgent side in the family as well. If I'm all the rules and he's more fun, well, that's good because otherwise they would just be getting a lot of rules, a lot of, you know, strictness. It's good that there's someone there creating a little different energy. So sometimes specifically with a husband, it's really good to think of them and understand that something which you could view as a weakness or a flaw, maybe it is, but not for you in your relationship with the person, because for you in your relationship is actually very good because it balances it out. Another way to process the flaws is to understand that even if in general these are flaws, but in certain situations they are very advantageous. Well, here is not one of them. Here I'm annoyed. Okay. But remember, sometimes this is a good trait for you. So even if you're annoyed now, you should remember that sometimes this very same trait is very good for you. So it's not fair for you to be so annoyed because sometimes this really works to your advantage. Like, let's say your husband is so helpful and does the dishes, washes the floor, takes care of the kids, and he's not such a go-getter at work. He's more soft, and you're like, you know, you're so annoyed. Why is he letting other people take advantage of him? Why are other people getting ahead of him? Why does he push more? He does such good work. Why is he just sort of, okay, that's true. But if you say, wait a minute, this exact same personality set is why he's so wonderful in the house and he's so nurturing and kind to me and to the children, and he takes such good care of me and he tries to be so helpful and kind and soft and compassionate. So I right now am annoyed because he's not pushing ahead in the work world. It's not fair. Like, I'm taking this trait and I'm saying, honestly, I get a lot of mileage out of this trait. This is a very good trait for me. Well, not in this situation. Well, you can't pick and choose the situations. If there's some times when this trait really is good for you, remember that in the other times and understand it's a package deal. Someone put up a chat. That's so nice. So Julie, I get maybe she's in a place she can't talk, but she wrote this beautiful thing in terms of this idea of balancing out qualities. What I was saying before this idea, that I said sometimes your husband could have something that might be viewed as a flaw, but it really balances you out. So for the family, it's actually good. And she said that's exactly what happens with her and her husband, that he's far more generous than she is. And he'd give away everything. And she wouldn't give, or wouldn't give so much. And over the years, it's balanced each other out. And she's learned from him to be more generous. And he learned from her to not give away the grocery money. So they're really, they harmonized each other. They created a balance. So that's a beautiful personal example Julie's sharing, that I'm giving over for the benefit of people that aren't reading the chats. That was exactly my point. Exactly my point there, where someone could say, no, it's not good that you can't trust him with money because he's just going to give it to someone else when you need to pay your rent or your mortgage or your gas. But yeah, but she's saying, but for me, it was really good, because otherwise, if I married someone else, I would still be maybe too stingy and not giving to others, but he's really taught me to give to others. And I've taught him to hold on to the rent money. So it's been a good relationship. It's a good balance. And sometimes you really, really see that in a couple, that they really can teach each other. They really can balance each other. So maybe it is a flaw, but not for me, because it's really helped me with my flaw. It's really taught me how to be a different type of person. That was a beautiful example of that. And what I was saying here was, again, just sometimes remembering how people are so complex, and this same trait that in certain situations you really don't like, in certain situations you really appreciate. And let's take, like, forget the balancing act. Let's take Julie's example of the very generous. And like sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, like, I can't live like this. We can't balance. We can't save money. We can't. But then you think, and you're like, wait, but there's so much beauty to that. And it's so nice for our children to be raised in an atmosphere where people are generously thinking about other people's needs instead of their own. And I love that. And I'm not like that. So this is really a beautiful trait. And sometimes it annoys me, but when it annoys me, I have to remember the beauty in it all those other times. So that's another way we really can refocus. And instead of feeling like flaw, problem, issue, say, oh, actually, that's really cool trait he has. In certain situations, that's wonderful. So obviously nothing here applies in an abusive situation. Obviously, God forbid, if you know of anyone that's in an abusive situation, you try to help the woman get out, or man. Sometimes men are in an abusive situation, protect them, protect the children. Often a woman in an abusive situation won't leave because she feels too weak. Over the years, she's probably started off a bit weak, and over the years felt weaker and weaker and weaker, powerless, or financially not capable. And sometimes women will leave to protect their children. So, but obviously that's not anything what we're talking about here. We're talking about healthy, normal, flawed human beings, because everyone has flaws. And we when we're looking in relationships, we really say, like, are the main pieces in place? Are the main pieces what I'm looking for? And if the main pieces are what I'm looking for, the other things are like small details. There's always details that aren't exactly how you want, but if the main pieces are in place, then we thank God, because that's what we're looking for in a relationship. So what we were saying was 3 different perspectives on how we can process flaws in our spouse or in other people in a far more positive way. And when we do this, 4, gave you 4 different ideas of how to process flaws in a more positive way. And that when you do this, it creates so much more peace and harmony and positive energy in the home. So the first idea was, if something's really annoying you, check yourself first. Is this my flaw? Because generally what really annoys me is my own flaw. And then if it is my own flaw, I can do the work of changing, modeling for the other person, spiritually helping the other person. And definitely as I do my own work, I'm gonna get less annoyed from them. That was the first major idea we discussed. The second one was, and we have 3 different aspects of the second one, recognizing it's not a flaw. It's not a flaw because actually it's a good thing. You're just not looking at it correctly. Oh, he's so stingy. No, actually, he's financially savvy. And if it's up to me, we wouldn't pay our bills on time and we wouldn't have been able to buy a house and we wouldn't have any savings. And I appreciate now what I first viewed as stinginess, because I actually realized it's not stingy at all. It's really a great trait. So I process a flaw, reshifting. It's a positive thing. The second one of these 3 ideas of maybe it's not a flaw is, as Julie shared, maybe in certain situations be a flaw, but for me, it's not a flaw because he balances me out because I'm so different and I'm such an extreme in the other direction. It's really good that there's a balance here and it makes the home more harmonious. It makes the children have a much healthier environment. And the third idea in this second idea of it's not really a flaw is sometimes it's a flaw and sometimes it's really good for me. And when I'm getting annoyed at it, I have to stop and say, wait a minute, this exact same trait is good for me in these other situations. And as such, I have to be accepting of it here when it's not good for me. Because so many other times it is good for me. And it's not fair, like to take advantage, and when it works for me, appreciate it. And when it doesn't work for me, be annoyed by it. I have to be appreciative the whole time, including those times when it doesn't work for me, because I have to remember that sometimes it does. So what we laid out here was 1, recognizing you have the same flaw and that road. 2, recognizing it's not a flaw with 3 different options. What I'd like you to think over now is to pick something in a spouse or in another person that's significant in your world, and to think, which one of these 4 roads do I want to try to walk with that issue? So I'd like you to pick one person, one thing that bothers you. If you can't think of anything that bothers you, you are amazing and you sit back and relax. But for the rest of us, one person, something that bothers you, and then like try to see which of these 4 is really what's going on here. Is it my issue and that's why it bothers me? Or is it really not a problem? And for which one of these 3 reasons? If people could think about that, and then you can either chat or I'll call you to see what you came up with. Because remembering, if it's version 1 of the story, I share the same flaw. That's why it's so annoying. The bottom line of that is I need to really work on my flaw. If it's version 2, which is it's not really a flaw, I don't have to work on my flaw, but I need to change my thinking to always remind myself, this is not a flaw. Or this is not a flaw that deserves or it's appropriate that I should be annoyed over. So someone has something to share about this? I came up with, I mean, maybe it was too fast, maybe another minute or 2. And, what we're looking at is taking something that bothers you in another person and then sort of thinking through the 4 options we said and saying, where does it fall in? Is it that it's my flaw too? Oh, I guess you lost your turn again. Okay. Is it that it's my flaw too, and that's why it's bothering me, and then I have to do the work to improve the situation? Or is it really not a flaw because I'm just framing it wrong? It's actually a positive trait. Or because it's good for me because it balances me out. Or because it's good for me in some situations. So even in other situations where I don't appreciate it, I have to remember there's plenty of situations where I do appreciate it, and therefore it's not fair for me to get annoyed. So to try to think through these ideas, thinking of trying to make this really practical, thinking of someone in your world that this is relevant for, there's a flaw, some flawed human being in your world that bothers you because you're also human. And like, which one of these 4 options could you use to process it more positively? Christelle?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I know you're not getting a lot of feedback, and for myself, I mean, I can say that this is definitely like hitting on a lot of things that I've been thinking about from last week's. However, it's just like you have to be in such a vulnerable place, and it's just like with life and busy and things, and it's just like to be able to be in that vulnerable place to really like think about these things and write them down. I mean, it's almost overwhelming how many things do come up, and how to tackle them at once and prioritize them is it's a lot. But I mean, I appreciate this very much because it's definitely stuff that needs to be addressed. It brings up a lot of things for myself.
You're absolutely right. That's a very good point. It's a lot of inner work. And maybe you didn't sign on to do all that inner work. You just came for a class. But everything is God's divine providence. So the fact that this is what I randomly I talk about, and the fact that each one of you happens to be on, does mean that this is on some level a message of God to you to think about these issues, because everything is divine providence. And either I could have chosen something else, or you could have not come on tonight. And that's always how we look at the world. We look at the world as like, this is very specific divine providence every single step of the way. That being said, sometimes things are just like awareness pieces. Like, okay, now I'm getting more aware of this, and maybe I can't do like maybe some more of the deeper work, but some of the work is easier. And it's so beneficial in a relationship. I'm saying like piece 1 was, hey, maybe it's my flaw as well. And then there's a lot of work. So even if you're not going to walk the road of work, you could just stop at that like first preliminary step. Maybe it's my flaw and that's why I'm so annoyed. Well, I shouldn't be so annoyed at him if I actually have the same flaw. It's a flaw. And guess what? I have it too, which is why it bothers me so much. So I can be tolerant of his flaw because I understand his flaw. I actually have the same one. So that doesn't require as much work. In terms of the other ideas of reframing flaws as not flaws, also there, yes, there's deeper work, but it could be more just like building yourself up with this vision of, is it a flaw or is my eyesight off? Maybe I should give the other person the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe my eyesight's off. And again, sometimes if you think about it, it's more obvious that your eyesight's off, and sometimes it's not, but maybe it is. And this is also like a muscle, just like we've discussed many times, gratitude to God for all the blessings in your life. Well, the more you do that, the better you get at it, which just means the more naturally everywhere you look, you see God's blessings. So similarly, if you're used to like reframing flaws and looking for the advantages in flaws and looking how this is really an advantage, at least for you, or looking how in some situations is an advantage, it just makes you in general a more positive person, a person who like looks at life and like just almost automatically reframes things in a more positive way. So that's just in general very helpful. So Danielle's saying, what about when you're in the heat of the moment, really upset? Breathe. Breathe. It's very cute. I do this with Beryl, my 8-year-old, almost 9 now. We do deep breathing, which sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't. And his older sister, who's almost 12, was having a meltdown, a major meltdown. And he walked over to her and he's like, cry, you know, cry. She ignored him. Then he went, breathe.
Oh, that's
Literally,
so
literally, I'm
sweet.
not exaggerating.
Oh,
And then he tried some other technique from his toolbox. I don't remember what it was, but the breathing was adorable, which made me feel like, oh, okay, you know what, people really get it, even if they don't, they really get it, because when they see someone else, that's what they do. So yes, it was adorable. It was one of those moments of, I wish I was more camera savvy and just pulled something out right then to take the picture, but it's in my brain. So the video's in my brain. So I think when you're in the heat of the moment, what you want to do is step away from that moment, which sometimes stepping away just means I'm going to keep my mouth closed. If I know nothing nice is going to come out, I'm just going to keep my mouth closed. Sometimes I'm just going to, not in a angry stomping way, but I'm just going to graciously move to another area of the home. Just because I'm not going to say anything nice. Whatever I'm going to say, I know I'm going to regret. So I'm going to keep my mouth closed and just walk away and breathe and breathe and breathe. And I think the most centering thing is thinking of your blessings. So if it's in a relationship, like you're really upset at this child or your husband or your mother or whoever, it's good to specifically think of the blessings in that relationship, of the positives in that relationship, of the good in that relationship. As you're not in this situation, you walked away graciously, no door slamming. You're breathing, you walked away, you didn't say anything, and you're just thinking of it. I know sometimes mothers are like, especially with children, they're done. Where am I supposed to go? So just go to the bathroom and lock the door. Give yourself a few minutes there just to breathe, think of the blessings that you have these children, think how grateful you are that you have these children, think of the blessings that you have these children, think how grateful you are that you have these children. And when you feel more centered, walk out of the bathroom. I do remember a woman telling me, much older than me, about 40 years older than me, that at a certain point, she was like 4 very rambunctious boys that she was raising, and her husband was off at work and she was, raising them. So at one point she got so whatever, she just hid the mattress and just walked out the door. She just had to get away. Just took a walk, breathed, took a walk, came back and was able to walk back in. So definitely, I think that's the overarching, in the heat of the moment, don't say anything, breathe, and try to remove yourself from the situation. And once you remove yourself from the situation, think of the blessings in this relationship, the blessings in your spouse, the blessings with your mother, the blessings with your mother-in-law, the blessings with your neighbor, the blessings with your children, the blessings with this child, until you're centered, and then you can return to the situation.
thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
Anyone else thought of ways to apply this in their own lives? Well, the basic points, I totally hear what Christelle was asking. I think that was a very honest point. I don't know if it was a question or a statement, but as you can, try to do the work, because it's valuable work. And because it just creates more peace and harmony and positivity in the home. It creates a much warmer, more pleasant, more respectful atmosphere. And yes, also between us and our children, there's creating a respectful atmosphere, a more positive atmosphere. And Sometimes again, sometimes it's really hard with a spouse, and sometimes it's really hard with kids, and sometimes it's both, and sometimes it's neither, but it's a different person in your life. But for somebody in your life, for sure, these tools are valuable. So try to think, at least with one person with one recurring flaw, work on it. One person, one recurring flaw, work on it. And then, why am I telling you one person, one flaw? Because hopefully when you actually see, oh, it works, it helps, you'll be motivated to do it with more flaws or with more people. Thank you so much for joining. And next week we will not have class because it will be the holiday of Passover. Exactly, Christelle. So we will not have class next week. It will be Passover, the holiday. But the following Sunday will be the day after Passover, and we will have class, which everyone, all the freedom the Passover enjoys, freedom here from being stuck in relationships, freedom in any other area of your life. This is a time to grab freedom, to go with freedom, and to create freedom for yourself and for this world. Thank you so much for joining. Be well.
Amen. Thank you so much.